You can spend money later on once your money pays you money. And that's something that I've got to teach my kid. Yes, work hard to earn money, then put as much of that money to work as quickly as you can. And then later on, when that money pays you money, that's the money you can spend on all kinds of fun stuff because you don't have to work to spend that money. Your money is already put to work. That's essentially what my goal in life is, to explain that to the most people possible.
Hello. Welcome back to the Get Invested podcast with Matthias and Jordan. As always, we are excited to be here with you today and talk a little finance, a little general world, and of course, I'm sure we got to fit in a little bit of chicanery. Matthias, I got to tell you, I've been trying to switch that word up every time, but I'm running out of words, right?
So I've noticed.
There's not too many more. I don't want to put any more out there right now, though, because I don't want to deplete my list. We've been talking a lot about goals, whether that be the goals for the company, goals for an individual, just a lot of looking forward here at the new year, which had us thinking about something that you could definitely frame as a long-term goal, which is, in the general sense, raising a child. In the more specific sense, it got us thinking and talking about the interesting phenomenon of, for lack of a better way of putting it, I'm going to steal Matthias's phrase, kids and money. And no, we're not talking about how much they cost.
Which is a lot.
But more, it's so interesting. It's so fraught. And it seems so lacking the ways in which we talk to kids. And I'm going to use kids generally. Sorry, teenagers out there that think you're young adults. We're talking all the way until, your formal education is done, because we do so much. That's one of the main things that society and parents aim to do, is to teach. But this is not one of those. And so it's not a main one, I guess. And so that's what got us thinking. And I'm going to turn it over to Matthias to, kind of share his opening thoughts. But I just want to say up front, this is not programmatic or prescriptive. We're just going to have a conversation because we thought it was interesting. And it's very much a thing kind of in our vein, crosses a bunch of different things that we're interested in. So we thought we'd just chat about this interesting social, I'm just going to keep it real neutral, say phenomenon. All right, Matthias, what's up?
Yeah, no, it's well put. Like I said, we talked about in the pre-show. Nobody here pretends to be an expert in raising financially successful kids, being as my oldest is 6. And yes, he did pick up some sticks over the winter holiday and earn some money, which I wrote about on LinkedIn recently. But that doesn't make me a successful, financial guru teaching kids. So, but really what we, Jordan and I, especially in our knowing each other as long as we have, we know how we were raised and how our families each approached financial education for the kids, or didn't approach it in some ways, because there was very little about finances that was talked about. And I don't know if that's changing nowadays. I haven't been a kid for a while, but I don't know if it's changing. I don't know if it has, but it was one of those things that was never talked about. So it's kind of this weird topic that I don't know that families talk about. And then there's a whole bunch of our aged people who are just not very financially savvy, who clearly their parents either weren't savvy themselves or didn't relay that effectively on, so that there's a whole swath of the population, it seems to me, that is walking around that isn't confident in general financial topics, investing or saving or even debt and all these different things, credit, all these different things that I think it is probably important and beneficial for most of society to be aware of as they come out of, as they join the workforce, at least, in my opinion. So we figured we'd just do some spitballing and talk around through. We'll share some stories about, what our families talked about. And this is, again, mom and dad. There's no, we're not throwing shade. Jordan and I are both doing okay. So whatever else you raised us saying, it worked. If it wasn't, if you weren't financial gurus, but that's kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we could, I was just thinking that we can start with just that, what was and was not talked about. There's a couple things here. One thing I might distinguish is, I don't know how many people who are listening to this have Gen X parents, but we have baby boomer parents. Well, no, wait, are your parents Gen X?
My parents were born in 62 and 63. So they're technically, I think, the very, very beginning Gen X.
The very beginning of Gen X. Okay.
I think so.
But I just think that, not that I want to make broad, sweeping claims about these arbitrary generational distinctions, but I would say that if you're raised by a baby boomer who was raised by people who went through the Great Depression, that's going to affect the way you
Hmm.
look at money, and how you were raised and where you come from is just going to affect the way you look at money, or just think about it, or anything, right? That just is.
100%.
And I think your parents fit into this because they're on the older side, where the relationship, and for lack of a better term, I want to say traditional. I don't mean that in any negative or positive way. Just there was more of a separation. Like there were adult things and there were kid things. Right. And in a lot of
100%.
ways, that was great. It was like, you're a kid, you don't need to worry about this. Right. We're not going to talk to you about it. This is our thing. And I'm sure parents still do that now. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't think that my parents didn't talk to me about money because they didn't know or didn't want to. It's just that was an adult thing, right? They're not going to
100%.
worry me about how tight things are unless, I want something that I don't need. And they're like, you know what? We don't need that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking back, and there's so many conversations that adults had while I was around that I don't know what they talked about, because it was literally like, "Hey, the adults are talking. Go play. Go do whatever your kids do. Go to your room with their
Yeah.
friends." And while the adults sat around, did their dinner talking or whatever it was that they were doing, it was like kids had kid time, and then adults had adult time where they talked about finances or whatever they talked about. I don't know. I was a kid.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to say that that doesn't still exist. I'm sure it does. I just know, I think I can say with some certainty or some authority, having been in the education game for a long time, that the relationships between parents and kids is just different now. And I'm
Hmm.
not saying it's worse or better. It is. And I think it's probably easier. And I think it's because we've come to understand that we need to probably tell kids more things, maybe. I would think it would be easier now to kind of have some of those conversations because, what's the old thing you never talk about at a polite dinner conversation? You never talk about money, politics, or religion. And that kind of
You
seeps
should
its
talk
way
about
into
all of
things, I think.
them. I think as your kids get older, I think you should talk about all three of those.
Yeah. And so I think that we, as an older millennial, there's definitely shifts in
Hmm.
perceptions and understandings and relationships and histories of our parents, which would shift some of those things for each of us as millennials, or whatever you want to say that we are. I like to say that I'm a zillennial because I'm pretty much in between the two of Gen X and millennial. Also, I don't like to be associated with all the negative things millennials get slapped with, but I guess maybe I am, maybe
There's
I'm
no
not. I
avoiding
don't
it.
know. So on that note, what I would say, even though I don't remember a lot of conversations specifically about money until I was probably, going to college, which is, it's a good time to really have those kind of conversations. I do know that this is one of the things I think that every kid learns because they learn things whether you teach them or not, right? And that is lifestyle. And that could be, one where you look at everything as a restrictive thing, or you are on the opposite side of that where maybe you're not as responsible, or you
Dig
do a
into that
good
a little
job of
more. What do
being
you
in
mean?
between. Well, so what I'm saying is you pick up whether your parents are like, okay, this is it. There's a circle, right? This is prescribed and we have to make sure we fit within this. And then you kind of just get that mindset of, okay, we have to fit within it. And even as a kid, you may not know what specific decisions they're making, but that's the philosophy.
Oh, in terms of, like, are you talking about like almost a budget? Like, hey, this is the things that we can afford.
Yeah, you may
We
not
live
even
in
think
this
about it
box
as a
here,
budget. Yeah, yeah,
as a monetary thing. But like, hey, this is the
yeah,
things that our family does. That we gonna do this. Got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly.
100%. That's how I grew up. It's like there
Or
was a lot of things. Hawaii was not a thing that lived in here. For
yes,
sure. When I was growing up, or Disney World, it's like, no, 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 we're gonna drive 3 hours to the beach and get sandy. That's what we're gonna do once,
yeah.
twice a
So
year.
I mean, I think that, if that exists, there has to be the opposite. I don't want to speak ill or cast aspersions on anyone, but there's the opposite where there's no sense of that, whether that be because of just
Money
general
has never been an
affluency,
issue for us. We get to do it. Yeah, yeah. Or the
or
opposite.
the parents just aren't really that great at money,
Yeah.
or they do a really good job of kind of hiding that and making things seem possible. Um, that seems the least likely of these scenarios, honestly, because that's a lot of work. That's a lot of emotional and
Yeah.
financial lifting.
Well, I think it goes in hand with, like, ignoring the problem. Like, let's say, you're not good with money, you're in debt, you just keep swiping the card, the kid's like, "Hey, yeah, we got new shoes again. That's what we do, we get new shoes," whereas they don't understand that, daddy's credit score is, in the single digits or whatever, and so there's this sheltering one way or another from the kid, either by kind of ignoring the problem as a parent, but yeah, I get what you're saying now. There's definitely a difference in the way people are brought up. But I would argue that probably the most of us fall into the this is how we live, just because there aren't that many people that have grown up without any type of restriction. But also, I mean, the circle can vary, right? There's, some, hey, we grew up in a mobile home and that's all we knew. And then there's we owned our home. It was a small, modest house, but that circle can be different. But I think most of us probably do that. But I don't know that we thought about it intentionally. It's just it might be in the back of our mind,
Well, that's what
subconscious.
I'm saying. It's back here, and the most interesting thing to me is that, like you said, there are the bigger circles, right? The goldfish doesn't know the bowl is there kind of scenario. But it does seem like no matter the circle, you can produce a child of all range of financial literacy, right? No matter how responsible or irresponsible, it doesn't necessarily translate. But I speak that way because I have just always lived. I've never been one to make a really specific budget. I just know there are things that I do and don't do. Right. It's never been to the penny type of thing. Right. And I mean, going through grad school and everything, I was poor for a very long time, but I didn't, come out with massive debt because it was like, well, I buy food, I pay my rent, I do the things I need to do. And then, I go out and do something once in a while, but not very often because I don't have that and I'm here to do something else. So it was always just mindset, I guess, is what I'm thinking. I just feel like I attribute that to my parents, where it's not about even necessarily restricting yourself. It's just knowing your limits.
Yeah, in full disclosure, I'm the same way. Even as I preach about making sure you're on a budget, to me, that's more of a I've never had a specific budget either. I know what comes in each month. That I track very carefully, right? And especially when I was in the military and we were trying to grow stuff and see how much we could deploy here, deploy there. But there was never any like, okay, we're only spending X amount, and when we get to here, we're done for the month. There was never any of that. I mean, literally, Jen and I have had conversations before where it's like, I feel like we've been going out a lot lately. We need to pull it back. And at no point do we dig into any numbers. It's all based on feeling because it's there. It's in the back of our head. Both of us, the subconscious. Like I feel like we've elevated this expense or that expense, and we should probably just pull it back because it's feeling uncomfortable, and that is just the feeling. There's nobody looked at a bank statement. You know what I mean? So you could just
Yeah.
tell.
Yeah. So I think that's probably attributable in a lot of ways to our upbringing. That
I would
it's
agree.
kind of just a consciousness that's there. So for people who don't have that necessarily, that's maybe or they're just more comfortable with concrete numbers. It's different where they're like, you know, going to the grocery store and they're not doing this because they only have $100 to spend, but they're like, no, I said I was only going to spend $100. And then they're like
Yeah, and I don't
counting
have
up.
the yeah. Well, what they're doing is they're building that. They're teaching their own brain that thing that we got. And some people, for whatever reason, they didn't get it in their. Maybe they didn't have a stable family budget or like household activity life to even go off of. There's no structure or whatever. So you got to build that into yourself. I think that's important. So if we're talking about kids and money, I think that's one of the most important things to do is know that there needs to be limits. And they're going to have to be self-imposed as soon as you get out of the house. And you find out a credit card, you could get yourself in a lot of trouble if you don't limit yourself, right? So I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to be able to teach kids as they go out into the world is that limiting principles.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was thinking about. I mean, I know that there was going off to school, there was definitely conversations about basic principles of like, um, getting a debit card, what a credit card can do, and what interest rate is, those kind of things. But you say that limiting principle, and I'm still trying to, we're still in this mode of why is it seem like we just as a society don't do a great job of having specific literacy conversations with kids, whether that be from the parent or the school system or whatever, just in general. And it seems like most of the conversations we have are no, we can't afford.
Whenever we do have
Those
discussions
are
about
the
money, it's
conversations.
I see what you're
Yes.
saying.
Yes, rather than here are the principles driving these decisions.
Mm. I think that's interesting, but I also think I think it's a product of generations past. Just like you said, we didn't talk about it. It wasn't a kid thing. It was can I have this candy bar? Can I have that Lego set? No, we can't afford. I can't just buy you stuff whenever you want. There's going to be a ton of that because kids are kids. But I do wonder if maybe we are coming out of that a little bit. In that
Mhm.
I don't know. There's a lot of parents who want their kids to like them, want them to be friendly with them, more friends than they are parents, and that could be a real problem when it comes to discipline. But also, I think rationalizing the decisions as they get older and they can kind of work through the mental exercises of understanding why, hey, we're saving money to go on a nice vacation in a few months. So that's why we're not spending on Lego sets every week, or something along those lines. But I think a lot of it is that it's a stressful topic for parents in general. And it could be stress between the parents. And so bringing that up when you guys may not be seeing eye to eye on what you're spending money on anyway, I think bringing that up in front of the kids, it might be a recipe for disaster anyway. So that might be another problem with why it's just not talked about as much. Is like we talk about money enough, we always end up yelling at each other. Maybe we don't want to bring that up in front of Jack and Jill.
Yeah, that's true. It is interesting you bring up the want to be friends thing because that's definitely a thing, and I'm gonna just kind of drive around that. But what is interesting is the conflation between explaining something to a kid, no matter whatever the age, right? Say 13, and letting them in on your thought process and kind of letting them into your world, and the idea that you can do that without trying to be their friend, right? You can have those open conversations where you're not their friend, you're their parent, whether it be, I mean, we're talking about money, but I mean, that can be any topic that people have a hard time talking about with their kids. And obviously, this is a financial podcast, so we're going to stick there. But
No,
I
I
think it's a hard thing for people to walk. And now I only have experience doing that kind of thing as more of as a teacher, but I think I can see that if they're like, okay, I'm going to talk to them more like a equal for this teaching moment, and then that gets kind of, for both parties, it's like we're shifting our
yeah,
dynamic.
I think that's important because I think back to like some of the conversations I've had with my parents, my dad, or whatever back in the day, and I think the ones that stick out the most and that where I felt the most, I don't want to say involved, but like that were the most meaningful to me were the ones where it seemed like he was just explaining his thought process on. I mean, it could have been army stuff, who knows what it was, but like
Mm-hmm.
when he's talking to me and explaining what he was thinking as he did stuff, I feel like those are very meaningful memories that I have, and it was probably because it was like he's you said it well, letting me into the thought process. I'm just a kid, he could have just said, "Here's what I did," and moved on. But he said, "Here's I was thinking this. We wanted to accomplish this. This was the next thing I needed to do after that, and this is why I did that to get to this." And to me, that it feels like, oh, I don't know. I mean, that's a bonding moment, I suppose, between parents
Yeah,
and kids, but
absolutely.
also it explains the reasoning behind it. And I think that would be good. I think that's a good goal for parents to have with
Absolutely.
kids.
And I think it's just another type of reframing because I know all kinds of kids and parents who, like, their parents are very keen on taking them to museums and science, natural history, art, traveling, exposing them to different cultures, right? They want them to be well read and all that. And that helps your ability to process complex thought, seeing variables, seeing the world in its all its richness and vastness, and that helps you the way you need to understand something at any given moment, which is all well and good. But like, did they ever explain to them all of the logistics of what it took to take them to see the Sistine Chapel, right? Like
I mean,
that
depending on
would
the
be,
age, it probably not.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. That might be just as educational as seeing the creation of Adam.
hmm No,
And
I think that's an interesting point. I think well, maybe that's part of the doing a disservice, unintentional, of course, but leaving out the mundane details or the painful details on the adult side of the equation. Like, hey, man, this is what went into getting you over here to do this cool thing. Daddy had to work overtime a couple of weekends, and mommy didn't get new clothes for a couple of months or whatever.
Or even just, I mean, even if there wasn't great monetary or material sacrifices, I'm sure there are probably some. You always have some sacrifices, right? It's like, forget the economist, but he says there are no solutions, there are just trade-offs. So there's some trade-offs no matter what, right? And but even just like, yeah, so we just kept an eye out for the package that we wanted at the price we wanted, and then we did all this communication with this travel agent, and then we got the thing that we wanted, and then
Hmm.
we had to pay attention to these deadlines, and then we made these, and then we booked this, and then we booked, and then we did the research on the
Hmm.
tours, and just all of that. Like, these are all the nitty gritty that goes into it,
Sure.
finance and otherwise. Because I know that I just, this, again, speaking from experience, I got so many kids who are so worldly and sophisticated in so many ways, but they had no idea what it took for me to take them to a debate tournament.
Hmm.
Right, like, I know they couldn't conceive of how much planning that took to take 80 of them. So I think our educational goals, they're the ones that we understand our goals, and then there's the ones that we haven't ever really said, okay, this is also a goal.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's, I don't know, maybe that's part of my mission on Earth, is to kind of convince people that it's important to have these because I think the best way to help the most people is to empower them to help themselves. If we gave away every billionaire's dollar in the world, it would last for a little while, but people would burn through 'em. But if we empowered everybody with a little bit of knowledge, a little bit more, and this all starts with the kids having those discussions early on, so that they kind of understand things a little bit further and faster than they would have had they just completely been left alone and discovered them later on. I think that's the goal to providing the most benefit, is to, hey, let's push this, start this education as early as possible to the most amount of people that we can, and maybe that involves helping parents understand why it's important to talk about these things, the decisions that they make, or the logistics and things that go into every decision, and involving the kids as they get older in that process. Like, hey, we're getting ready to go on our next trip to see Rome, or whatever, and now help us go through this process as the older kids or whatever. I think that's kind of the goal, right? That's what we should be doing.
Yeah. And I know there's so many reasons why, it doesn't happen. And of course, that's not what we're here to do. Is we're not here to talk about failures. It's just an interesting thing. What are the kind of barriers? And one of them is just how busy everyone is. It's just tough to squeeze that in, which is why I guess I keep coming back to, if you just literally explain to them how you got something done. There's a lot of different ways to solve these problems. So they may be exposed to different versions of them, right? So one of the things that, when we started talking about this and thinking about this for this podcast, I was thinking about the fact that there are personal finance classes in high school, and I'm sure there's some version of basic finance in college. And then there's, of course, all the advanced stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but I've actually witnessed quite a bit of the personal finance class. Now, this was the one in North Carolina, they recently just passed a law that you had to teach this certain course. You had to take it as a senior that included personal finance. And so the curriculum has changed. This was an elective class that I witnessed, and it had a lot of good topics, but this is one of the challenges, and which is why, again, it might be more effective sometimes if literally a parent just describes, they're not even trying to teach. They're just like, this is what I did. Is because it's really hard to make some of these decisions and calculations real for a 15-year-old in a classroom setting. Like, okay, here's the health insurance market. How are you going to choose health insurance, right? Or, how are you going to build your particular product? I mean, they try to go all different ways in which you could think about finance, balancing a budget. I mean, especially insurance. The 15-year-old thinks he's going to live forever and he's never going to get hurt. Like, I mean, that's
100%.
not,
Yeah, he
yeah,
doesn't
that's
care
not
about
real.
insurance.
Yeah. And, so it's like, oh, these are not my concerns. So it can
Yeah,
be
so we're
difficult. And
definitely
I understand that.
we're fighting against attention spans. We're fighting. I mean, that 15-year-old kid's going, look, that the girl I'm crushing on is 2 seats up and 1 to the right, and she just turned around, and the last half hour of the class is completely dead to him. He has no idea. You know what I mean? So, he's 15,
Yeah.
I get it. But at some point, as they get closer to getting out into the world and joining, like we said, joining the workforce, going to school, whatever it is, we have to at some point figure out how to get through to them, so that they don't show up with a, $150,000 in debt and a degree that isn't paying anything and go, what happened? And you're like, ugh, now we're starting from worse than zero, bro. We gotta backtrack and we gotta figure out how to undo some stuff.
Yeah, and I think that is a particular conversation when you go if you're going off to college. I think that one might be a little bit easier to have, thankfully.
I think so, but it clearly hasn't. There's a whole lot of people, maybe 10 years, 5 to 10 years younger than me, that missed that conversation, and they're sitting in a world of hurt right now.
Yeah, and where there was a lot of catch up of the college degree is definitely the thing that's going to put you on your way, and
Because
then
there's a
that
generation
kind of got
before that was like
yeah,
had no access to that.
pretty
There was no
much
chance
true.
they were going to
Yeah,
college, and they're like, "Oh my
yeah,
god, I'm putting my kids in college." The end, I did it, success. It's like, well, what are they going to study? Or what's the job afterwards? How are
right.
they going to pay that off?
This idea of going to college, and that's an admirable goal, and if that's something you want to do and pursue. I mean, obviously I loved college, and you did too, and I loved it so much I went back multiple times, but though that wasn't really college, that was a different thing. But I think one of the interesting things that I've been thinking about that ties into that, because you work hard to get into school, right? I think we so often, in a lot of different ways, honestly, tie work ethic to financial understanding or ability with money. And those are very different things, right? Like, I let my kid get a job and so they could understand what it takes to make money. Okay, cool. But did they understand that that little bit of money that they were making seemed like a lot because you were providing all of you
All
know
of the other things
they,
that go in.
they were just all they were doing was the iceberg point that's sticking out of the water.
No, I was gonna say that there's definitely two avenues. One, you need to learn how to work and how to, like, defeat the lazy self and go and work, do hard things, do tough things 100%. But just because you can do that does not mean that you know how to make wise financial decisions, because there's plenty of people working very, very hard that have nothing to show for it, unfortunately. And they're very strong work ethic, but they've never learned how to direct that, or how to, what do they say, work smarter, not harder, right? Like, hard work doesn't necessarily just mean hard work will get you everything you want in life. You're going to have to learn how to direct that. There's going to be some education, some good decision making tied to it, to the hard work, that's going to allow you to get to where you want to go in life, versus just put your head down and grind. That's You can do that, and sometimes it'll work out, but there's got to be some two avenues. I agree. I think just working hard is not going to be enough.
Well, I mean, if all you ever did was just work hard and you never spend any of your money, sure, but that seems very, very unlikely.
Yeah.
um,
Well, also, I mean, there's a
s-
limit to how long people can do that. I mean, some people are superhuman and they could just be a hard worker there. And then there's a whole bunch of people coming from maybe the Great Depression that did that. Literally, just, hey, I never had anything to show for anything. All I know is that I have to work, and then they did that until they died. And very admirable people, but I mean, you don't have a whole lot to leave to your family, and if that's all you've ever known, that's all you've ever known. But
well, and I mean, of course, we have to make caveats for the varying circumstances of the working hard. But in this instance, I'll just use my parents. My dad, as a minister, on purpose made very little money to do the thing he wanted to do. And then he worked very, very, very hard, but he also was able to translate that little bit of money into something that grew,
Mhm.
and now it's the different scenario at this point. And of course there are people who are in circumstances where there's not ever going to be much to grow, but we talk a lot about the people who work really hard and make decent to good to great money, but then also that doesn't mean that they don't spend it terribly as well, right? Like, making money doesn't mean
100%.
anything.
That's what I fight against, right? Is that I try to tell people
Yeah.
is that, look, you can spend money later on once your money pays you money, but don't you work to get paid money and then spend that money. Don't do that. That's something that I've got to teach my kid, is like, yes, work hard to earn money, then put that money to work, as much of that money to work as quickly as you can. And then later on, when that money pays you money, that's the money you can spend on all kinds of whatever fun stuff because you're not hurting yourself. You don't have to work to spend that money. Your money is already put to work. That's essentially what my goal in life is, to explain that to the most people possible.
And it's just interesting to me that I think in our society that we often attribute work ethic and money situation, like we connect those two, and I just don't think they have really
Mhm.
anything to do with one another. Because if you're the, and I'm not speaking of anybody in specific, just that theoretically, like if you're the son of a billionaire, you're going to be, you don't have to work at all. And I'm pretty sure you're going to be okay with money. That's like, at no point is anyone ever going to know what your money management situation is. Right.
Well, I
So
mean,
on the other side, I mean, it might get out, but on the other side, like I just think about when I was teaching and kids would try to tell me, oh, I couldn't do my homework last night because I had to go to work. And I'm like, okay, well, it's good that you have a job. That's cool. That's a good life lesson. But are you supporting your family? No, I just have a job because I work at the, yogurt shop or whatever. And I really like it. And, because when you're 16, and you're given some responsibility and you do a few things and then you get money for it. I mean, that's like the
it's
most
awesome,
amazing
right?
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But okay, well, if you were like, hey, I had to work because otherwise my 10-year-old brother doesn't eat, we would have
Very
something to
different
talk
story.
about. But you just dropped your $200 AirPods on your $400 Jordans, and you drove your like Subaru that is yours to school today. So did you have to work or did you want to work? Because it's good that you're working, but we might need to figure out our priorities. Like if your priority is in school, that's fine. That's okay. But you can't be
Can't
my
have
problem
both.
that you went to
Yeah.
work. Right. So like you're learning one kind of work ethic, good, but that work ethic isn't going to necessarily get you to where you probably want to go / what you're used to living like. And
Mhm.
that's another gap. So this is a lot of interesting stuff, but I think we probably should turn to what kinds of things do you think, let's put it this way, what are you thinking about doing? And I mean, I have some ideas too, but like what are you thinking about doing? What kinds of things do you think you're going to ask of Ethan and Aaron that might teach them not just working hard, not just making money, and not necessarily just like budgeting or managing their money, but like understanding how money is a tool?
Well, understanding how money is a tool, I think that's a lot. What's going to go into that, and I think it's a very good topic to bring up. I think there will be a lot as they get older. I think there'll be a lot, and I've already had conversations like this. It's like, well, mommy and daddy are working, and that's how we get to go on our nice cruises, and how we get to go see Nana for Christmas. That costs money. All these things cost money, and we have to make money in order to be able to do these things. And so, we start having those conversations, but also I think just in general, what aside from the work ethic, which we've talked about, and that post where Ethan decided he wanted to go pick up, my brother-in-law told him he'd pay him per stick that he picked up out of the yard, and he spent the next 2 hours running around the yard picking up every stick he could find in the cold, wet rain and freezing, and it was pretty impressive. I was very proud. But so work ethic, okay, cool, he's got that. But also I want to point out that along the lines of how to direct our work, how to focus it. I think I want to teach them. I think a lot about how I'm going to teach them entrepreneurship, or essentially how to solve problems, how to solve problems at scale. That's what entrepreneurship is, right? You see a shortfalling or a niche in the market that or a problem to solve that problem and figure out how to solve it for as many people as possible. That's how we get the iPhone. That's how we get all these cool objects, cars. That's how we get all these things. Somebody figured out how to do it. It could be with a widget like an iPhone or a car. It could be with a service, lawnmower job, whatever, or picking up sticks job, whatever it is. I want to teach them that. I want to teach them how to identify a need and solve that need. And really, if you can do that, I'm not even concerned about the money. It's more the idea of being able to like look at a situation and identify a way to improve it. I think that's a more valuable skill than to figure out how to monetize it like you'll monetize things later. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Or does that even answer your question?
That makes sense. But I was just thinking that, I mean, I know that both of us have talked about, going back to kind of our modest upbringings, that we didn't really have much concept of all the different ways that one could invest, all the different ways that money could work,
Mm,
do things for you. For instance, I remember the first time I got a real credit card, senior year of college. I had done the starter card, as it were,
sure.
well enough that I was able to get an Amex, the old
I
like
remember.
silver
I
clear or
remember.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I remember
yeah,
that one.
yeah, yeah. I remember my parents like had this really crappy system for their computer to listen to stuff, and I was just like, this is unacceptable. So I just went to Best Buy and just bought them a good stereo system for Christmas, and I was just able to go like, boom. Right. It wasn't an absurd amount of money, but it was more than I probably had in my pocket at that moment. Right. So I was like, you know what? This is fine. I have a good job waiting tables. I'm good with money. I'll pay this off. It's fine. I'm just going to do this for Christmas. I'm just going to solve this problem. I'm tired of it. And that was the first time I was like, whoa, I just was able to do something that I hadn't been able to do previously because of this thing. And I was willing to do it. I'm willing to pay that little bit of interest or whatever. And I paid it off almost immediately, but it was like, okay, I'm willing to do this. This is how this can be solved. And that is solving a problem, but that's understanding, all the different ways in which, like I said, it can be a tool, not just a limited resource.
Yeah, yeah, I got what you're saying. I think on those, I think we're going to start in. I have brainstormed on this in terms of like basically basic investing or beginner investing. We're gonna do savings accounts that have some sort of interest earning, and say, hey, this money, since we are putting off spending this money, it's going to start earning more money, and now we're going to have it's the M&Ms now versus more M&Ms later kind of thing. It's like, hey, if we can wait on, we can buy more Legos later if we wait until it grows bigger, and we'll start there and we'll work towards. Like, I fully plan on doing a little brokerage account with each of them, and doing like
Okay, I
stock
was going to
picking, right?
ask. That's
Like
what I
stock
figured, like
picking.
one of your things. Yeah, yeah.
Yep, and I mean, who knows where we'll be real estate wise? Obviously, I mean, it's going to be like not until after they're 13, 14, they can start understanding a little bit more complex concepts. But like, we'll have portfolios, and they will come to work with Daddy and look at decisions that we're making. And hey, we have, here's how much this property cost. Here's how much it's producing. Here's how much we owe on the loan. Here's all the expenses we got to. We'll go through all that and be like, hey, the reason we bought this property is because it pays us this much. We have that much sitting in it, and now it's returning us this much. We're growing. All the benefits of real estate. Really, we'll do that. We'll do work days with Daddy when they can kind of get to the point. I think that's one of the best ways, because I'll just be like, here's what I'm doing today. I am talking to this, maybe sit in on some calls with property managers or whatever, and be like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why we're able to do our cool vacations, is because a while back we put this money into here, and now it's paying us this money. And my parents were, for whatever reasons, we just never talked about money. Like, I remember the day I learned how much my dad made, and I was like 15, and it was like, there was just a number they wrote on the board, and I don't even know how we got to that topic, but it was just like, it blew my mind. I was like, oh wow, dad makes that much money. And it wasn't a wild number. It was pretty very well. I mean, it was in the 90s, so it would have been mid 90s, 2000 maybe. So it was very modest, but it's like, we
And it
just
was but it was at
didn't
the end
have
of his
this.
career.
Yeah, and we didn't
Yeah.
have this conversation that I plan on having with my kids, because I fully plan on opening the books, be like, here's the books, and there's going to be varying levels of interest, I guarantee. But at some point, they will understand what mommy and daddy have been doing for the past 10 years, 20 years, or whatever it is at that point, that that gets us to this point, and why we thought it was a wise decision to do this at that time, and here's what it has grown to because of this, that, and the other. I think those are the conversations I'm going to have in order to get them to understand what I learned and what I figured out, and what this whole thing's about.
Well, I'm glad you got there, because that was what I was going to bring up. It's great that you can show them your business and teach them. I mean, not, but everyone else is. the parent that's a software engineer and a lawyer or whatever,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that's
true. My
a very
investment
different.
business is gonna teach
Yeah.
investment
So,
theory,
but if
hopefully.
they could say the same thing, right? Like, hey, here's how much we make, right? And that's again, that is one of those things that feels weird to talk about, I think. And that's one of the
Mhm.
reasons. I mean, I think it's very similar to having conversations about sex with kids, right? It just feels like it's a tough thing to
We're breaking
negotiate.
that kid-parent
Yeah,
barrier.
exactly.
Yeah.
And this is like, this is what we make. But I mean, when you saw your dad's number, you're like, holy crap, that's so much money.
Mhm.
But then if like you were shown from earlier than that, like how much food costs, how much insurance costs, how much the mortgage was, like how much, like
Oh,
all the
yeah,
way down the
I would've
line.
been like, "Oh
Yeah.
my god, we're the poorest people in the history of the world."
So
"Give that RC Cola back, Mom. There's no way we can afford that and
yeah,
the macaroni too. We gotta have to have the macaroni though, because I'm hungry."
I think that just being like, yeah, look, this is it. And I think that goes back to something you said earlier, like, oh no, you can't have those Legos, we can't afford it. Even just changing that to, one, it could just be you don't need that because we have other
I
things
say
to
that a
are
lot.
going to, or just say that's not part of the plan. I would think
Mhm.
would be an interesting thing. Like, here's our plan, right? And
Yeah, no, I can start that pretty soon too. That's a good way to put it is, look, we're planning to do this with our money, and we've all agreed that's what we wanna do, which means that we're not gonna be able to do all these other little things that we wanna do because we already have a plan, so we're sticking to our plan, and that'll teach them a lot of the discipline of delaying gratification and all the important things that are, you have to have as an adult if you're not gonna be a wild animal.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's a better way, honestly, to think about. We have said budget a lot, and I know that we're kind of owning our own. Like, we've talked about budgeting a lot, but I think really more it's about plan and goal rather than budget. And that's where like I said, I agree with this writer I've been talking about who writes about the budget. Um, like the idea of the budgeting mindset or whatever, where she's like, this is the not exactly the best way to think about it. And I think it's more like, because a budget looks at like surviving, which may be necessary, absolutely. But if you have a plan and a goal, it's just reframing again. Um,
Assigning
and
priority
yeah,
versus to longer term things versus the shorter term things. Sometimes that's, hey, which do you want more, this thing now or this thing later that we're planning for?
and I mean, my parents did that definitely in like really simple ways. Like, okay, do you want a birthday present on the 13th and a Christmas present on the 25th of December, or do you want to
You want
hold
one
off
big
and
one.
get a much better one? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's the one marshmallow, two marshmallow experiment
But
to
that's an
the
important thing
T.
to learn, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't really know. I would think this may be time consuming, but even just making choices with money, like give Ethan $10 in Walmart and be like, you get to buy
We've done that
whatever you
before.
want with this $10, but that's it.
Yeah,
That is
what we
not
did.
bailing you out for like that next 50 cents. This is it.
Yeah, exactly. It better fit.
Yeah.
No, we actually have done that before to where we went. Um, my mom does this thing where she'll send each of her kids, all six of us, $100, our families now, $100, and say before Christmas and go, hey, give this away and tell us the story of Christmas. And
Okay.
so we last year we took 2023, not 2024. We took Ethan to Walmart, and there's a troubled kids home, and they like troubled enough to where they wouldn't tell us his name. So I made up a
Mm.
name because Ethan didn't understand. I was like, "There's a little boy," and I don't even remember what I told him the name was, but I was like, "There's a little boy, and we're gonna go pick out some toys." They basically had like a little shopping list for this little boy, and we
Yeah.
said, "Okay, Ethan, we're gonna go to the store. We have $100 that we're gonna spend, and we picked out action figures and Spider Man, whatever it was that we picked out, but it was along that lines of, hey." What do you think he wants? Do you think he'd prefer this one or this one? Because we can't have both; they don't fit into you know what I
Yeah.
mean. And so we
Yeah.
did a lot of that, and I thought that was a cool experiment along those exact same lines. Is here's a finite number that you can play with, and we can mix and match. And he's getting better at the math now too, so we could probably start.
Yeah.
Because then it was just me just saying, hey, you can have these three and this one, or these two and these two, but we can't do these and that. It was me telling him. He didn't really. He was,
Yeah, he couldn't add it up.
yeah,
But, right.
He was like 4.5, 5 at the time. So
Yeah. Now I do look forward to the time where he makes a stock bet with his little brokerage and it just goes bust, and you're just like, that's tough, bro. It happens though.
Well, as long as he doesn't beat me, as long as he doesn't go, hey, Dad, I just made $4,000 yesterday. What'd you do? Give me that brokerage account that's in my name anyway.
Like we've said from the beginning, as we wrap up here, like we understand this is tough. And you're going through life, and you got to teach them as much as you can in the time that you have. So hopefully this has been, I don't know, helpful is really the right word. Interesting. Yeah. Maybe spark some thoughts in you.
Thought provoking. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then honestly, if you have any thoughts about any of this that you'd like to share with us, I mean, if you please,
or recommendations for ways that I can,
recommendations, things that you've done that you think are cool, like we would love to come back to this. Absolutely. If you want to yell at us for things that you think that we got wrong, Matthias is on LinkedIn, and you can easily find him. Yeah. No, but any comments or questions or thoughts that you have on all of this, we'd love to hear from you guys on any of that. We're gonna wrap this up here. As always, if you enjoyed, please let us know, either again through a comment or a restack or a like or a heart or a thumbs up, etc. And we appreciate you guys hanging out and listening to us, and we will talk to you next week. This has been the Get Invested podcast.
See you guys.